Well, hello and welcome again to Veterans on the Front Porch. I'm your host, Clint Brown, and today I have the privilege and pleasure of having Harold Chamberlin, a name and a face that's known around Wolfeboro for many things, but mostly for veterans. And Harold, thank you for coming and welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here.
Now, when did you serve?
I joined in '66. I got out in 1970.
Okay.
When I joined the service because I was 2 years behind in school. Mathematics was very difficult for me. So talked to my father, who was very pro-education, and I told him there is no way, even though I was passing my sophomore year, there's no way I was going to be able to do junior year mathematics. And back then, we was required to serve. So I told him I was going to join the service, and then I would do the GED. So when I got out, I had what we referred to as our military obligation out of the way, and then I would also have my high school diploma, which is just the way it turned out.
So where did you serve when you were in?
I served about 10 miles south of Da Nang.
Oh, so you were in Nam.
When I was in Vietnam, yeah. And I got my training. I was a telephone lineman, MOS called 2511.
Okay.
And telephone switchboard, climbed telephone poles and the like.
Yep.
And I went, of course, to Parris Island, South Carolina for boot camp, and then ITR, Camp Geiger, Camp Lejeune, and that's a reserve training center now.
Yeah.
And then I went to Camp Pendleton, California for my lineman school, and then I was sent to what we call it the 33 areas, WMs now, Women Marines are there now, and we served there, and then I've been there a year or so, and then my brother, who had been on sea duty, was in the Marines. He came out to visit for a few weeks, and he did some small amount of training at Camp Pendleton. Then he went up to the Presidio up at San Francisco for interpreter school.
Oh, wow.
And then he got sent to Vietnam, where he lost his life, lost a lot of blood. He got caught in an ambush, and he lost his life over there.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
So I didn't have any more leave left because I just done my 30 days leave. So they cut me orders to be special TAD orders to be his escort. I had to escort his remains back here to Wolfeboro.
That must have been hard for you.
And it wasn't so hard until we opened the coffin, because we had to identify the remains. As the oldest surviving son and my father, we had to physically see it, because unfortunately during Vietnam there'd been cases documented with the wrong individual got sent to the wrong people.
Right.
And I'd heard a couple of cases, they said the son was deceased.
And he wasn't.
And he was not.
Right.
So, anyhow, so shortly after we buried my brother, I got orders for Vietnam. So I called home, told the folks that I'd got orders to go. And then I found out 2-3 days later, I personally didn't have to go with my outfit, because even though I'm not a sole surviving son, the laws back then were such that when you lose a family member like I did, it was really a year before they had to send me again. But I figured I'd already made the calls, got that hard part done. I might just as well go with the outfit I trained with. And it was funny, I don't think half of the guys I trained with went over with us.
Wow.
They took everybody out, second-timers and people who had never been here like myself, stuck us all together. This was the 3rd Battalion, 27th Marines, and they sent us over. And then I served over there. I learned a lot of things, like don't use flashlights at night when there's snipers around.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. You wanted a story. I'll tell you a little story.
Okay.
You know the little pencil light thing? Well, as a lineman, we had them, and they had blackout capabilities, so you couldn't really see them, but the spot right in front of you, you couldn't see them from side to side very well. Well, I was switchboard watt at the COC bunker, center of command. And a line went out, and we'd been having sniper rounds, and it wasn't uncommon for right up on top of the COC bunker, all sandbags.
Right.
It was an area about the size of this room. Sometimes a bullet would hit one of our wires and pull it out. We'd have to go up, cut it back, put it back in there. So I went up there. You never seen black like Vietnam when it's dark and there's no stars out. It was blacker than black. So I went up there and stuck this little flashlight in my teeth, and I'd take my jackknife and I'd push in the button, pull the old wire out, strip back the wire, stuck it in there, and that's when I found out, yes, snipers can shoot at me.
Wow.
They can shoot at me. So that was. I mean, this is so dark. It looked like that bullet went right in front of me. That's what it looked like. So I'm not going to use the terms that I use, but I was an unhappy camper, and I just flipped right over backwards, and I landed beside the bunker, and they had all this razor concertina wire down.
Oh, sure.
Well, I tell you, that was the most comfortable bed I have ever slept in. I might have been like this, but they couldn't get me while I was down there.
Right, yeah, sure.
And they thought I was gone because I didn't come down, and people saw me tip over. It just about simulated someone being hit with a bullet instead of someone that's really fast and getting out of Dodge. And so they sent a small fire team out from the gate, and we had an Amtrak out back that was to be shot at for target practice.
Yep.
And the guy who had cut my hair that day, the barber, he was the one that was a sniper, shooting from inside that old Amtrak.
Really?
It's just like a small room, the Amtrak, you know. And so the next day they decided that they'd get that out of there. It wasn't really a great idea to have target practice for their Marines, you know.
Yeah, right.
But they heard, you've got a man down behind the bunker. So the corpsman came out and all these people, wire cutters and all that, and they looked out, and I looked up and I says, "Morning, Skipper." That was the captain. "Corporal Chamberlin, what are you doing down there?" I said, "Well, sir, I'm just hanging out with the guys. That's all. Time for coffee yet? I missed breakfast, you know." And he laughed at me. He's basically, "You're a nut." And I said, "Sir, this is the nicest place I've ever been because they can't shoot at me down here."
Absolutely.
So I explained what I did, and they pulled me out of there, and then it went around the camp. This lineman, you know, he knows how to get out of sight fast. But after that, if the wire went out, I had to learn touchy-feely. Never mind flashlights.
No more light.
Yeah, never mind flashlights. That's right. They, you get a young man that barely turned 18 years old, and someone actually shoots at him in a combat situation. You know, they're shooting at the others, even your friends.
Yeah.
That's them. When it happens to yourself, that's quite an eye-opener.
Oh, I bet
That's
it
quite
is.
an eye-opener.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And, but, you know, they went out and this happens and that happens, and, you know, and everybody's got their story. So I went back on the switchboard. They said, "Hey, so you slept all night. You might as well relieve the switchboard operator who's been taking your place." Something like, you lazy bum or something like that, you know. So, you know, I had to, they did let me go change my shirt and patched me up, Mercurochrome, whatever the corpsman stuck on me but I didn't thrash around. I said, "I'm a farm boy. I've been in barbed wire before, so, you know, it's not a good idea to thrash around.
No, you could have been.
Someone cut you out, you know."
Yeah.
So, but the, you know, Vietnam wasn't all bad in my case. I met some real fine people over there. I saw one of the most amazing sights that I never dreamed of. Now, them folks are very patient, things they do. There was a mahogany log, probably about the size of the doors, roughly, you know, 8, 10 feet diameter, and they had it laying down on the ground. Yeah, I was estimating to say 20 feet long. And they had this crosscut saw, and they was cutting that up into boards by hand.
Really?
Remember the old wooden buck saws we had as kids?
Yeah.
And when they were sawing it this way, up and by hand.
Wow.
A man and he just had a few lines, but mainly he was cutting that up into inch boards by eye. And having been raised since 5 years old, axes and saws and things, that was the most amazing thing. The guy up and down. I mean,
And he never measured? Never had to measure?
He just was sawing. I mean, I looked all over. I saw a couple little tick marks like he might have made with a hatchet.
Right.
You know, so you can just kind of keep the line. And they redid the officers club. Yes, we had them, and they used bamboo.
Yeah.
And their craftsmanship is amazing. You see this wizzled up little old guy. I mean, he looked like 90, probably only 35, but when you're 18, everybody looks old.
Yeah,
you know.
it's true.
And,
That's so true.
We had a commanding officer. He was quite elderly. I think he was 27. He was our captain. He was an old guy, you know.
Yeah.
And so, but like I said, Vietnam wasn't all bad for my case.
Right.
They found out just prior to leaving for Vietnam, I get stuck on mess duties. Now I don't like working in the kitchen. I just ask my wife; she'll tell you I don't. So I landscaped the outside of the mess hall. There's ice plant out in California, so I planted them all around, and where people would walk and they just walk over the grass. There was no grass up there. I made lines and I put little ruts and I made walkways. And there was some geraniums growing kind of wild. And I planted the geranium. Of course, I did the officers and staff mess first. I knew which side the bread, the butter goes on, you know. And I landscaped it. So when I got in Vietnam, the CO wanted to dress his area up. He sent me with a detail, 3 tanks in 2 Amtraks to get banana trees. They were much bigger than the size of your camera over there. Sir, I had to question my commanding officer's sanity, and I was corporal by this time. You got to be careful how you do that. You know? He says, "Hey, I've been told to do this," so I went out with all these guys, and here's a Corporal E4, strictly speaking, in charge of all these guys. The amount of security they had just so I could dig up some bushes, and I didn't have to dig them up. There's some grunts out with shovels. I guess they practiced digging trenches or something. They could dug all them banana trees up. And while they was doing that, I didn't have a whole lot to do. I found a garden that somebody had left undone, and they had a hand-carved garden hoe in there. Wow. It was not just a garden hoe functional, which it was. It was a beautiful piece of craftsmanship. The craftsmanship in that simple tool. So when they made something, they made it well. So I couldn't help myself. I took the garden hoe and I weeded that old garden. They had some potatoes and they had corn. Corn grows good over there. And it was the things that they had over there. I mean, if you could look beyond the war, look beyond the fighting and all that, it was amazing.
Well, I know it's a beautiful country.
It is.
You know.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to visit.
I didn't get to go in country. I was on an aircraft carrier in the Tonkin Gulf, so I didn't get the experience that you obviously got.
Well, you got to see the good behind the bad.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, you joined up, and what possessed the Marine Corps? Was it something that you always wanted to do, or?
My brother went in the Marine, so I wanted to be like my brother.
Okay,
And it was amazing in my case because my father did lineman work in the Army because everyone wants to be like Daddy. And the stories he told, and because my last name begins with C, that you're going over here, you're going over here, you're going over there, and so long as you pass the basic test, you get to stay there. You start flunking out, they put you in the infantry.
Okay.
That's it. We call them grunts, if we affectionately known as. And I remember some of the crazy stunts that my father told me about that he did. Now I've got the actual equipment and seeing what the equipment could do. At Camp Pendleton, we had a field operation, a comm exercise. And it was my job to run the wire to the civilian trunk line to Camp Pendleton. And the lineman's part of that particular exercise was to get communications with our commanding officer to Camp Pendleton, the headquarters.
Right.
We had to get there, and the only rules in the engagement was over there. The enemy, if they could find our wires, we was open game. But they couldn't touch the line out by the telephone pole because there was absolutely no other place to hook on.
Yeah.
So beyond that, well, like I said, I raised right here in Wolfeboro. I was on a farm, and I took over that line, and nobody could find it. And the inspector was a warrant officer who had been staff sergeant in the Marines, and he had been a lineman, and he was Chamberlin, where in the thunderation is this wire? We followed it from backwards. We can't find your wire. I want to know where this wire is. And I'd hooked to a sheep fence.
Wow.
And they were all insulated.
Yeah.
So I only had like 20 feet of wire from the switchboard, and I went over here and I covered it up with leaves like you do. Camouflage and concealment, we call it, you know.
Yep.
And then just a simple E-tool that got like a spike on the back. I just dragged it through and I put that wire through there. Said nothing to anybody. No one's business but mine. And I hooked it up that way, and there is a component. It's like a transformer, but it doesn't increase the power. It maintains it constantly.
Right. Yeah.
Called a C161. Anyone watching this knows I know what I'm talking about. And I put one on the other end, but there again, I covered it all up. That sheep fence went within 20 feet of the telephone pole.
Wow.
We had to go to. So I didn't have to run like 3 miles of wire.
Right, yeah.
All I did, trace the wire, make sure it was working. So I put one here, one there, so it was 2 wires, and it's completely camouflaged right out in plain sight.
And no one could find it.
Well, because it was private property. Camp Pendleton is not owned by the United States. We rent it.
Really?
It's part of Poncho Village Ranch.
I didn't know that.
See? Come
Wow.
to the kid, I'll tell you. And like I said, as a training, you can have some fun there too. Yeah. And of course, see, I'd known about the fence because we'd had another exercise prior to our COMEX, and that was where the Mike Company, these companies, we had aggressors and all that stuff. And then to break up the 2 exercises, a lot of people went back to the camp. We stayed to guard. So I had carte blanche to walk all over the place all I wanted to.
Wow.
So that's how I walked this sheep fence. I had a pretty good idea what was going to happen. I said, I'll take that job. and they said, it was amazing. They never would have thought of it. My line sergeant, the big guy we had at Camp Pendleton, he mentioned that could be done. So long as you use the proper equipment to boost it up, just keep it lined so it's not going to lose, because sheep fence is much more coarse than your line. So that can give me some drag. So they noticed perfect communication is 5 by 5. So this is like 3.5, maybe 4 by 5.
Okay.
Very, very good comms. Just maybe not right up peak, but they figured they'd allowed for certain circumstances, just to not some farm kid with a sheep fence. So you got to do what you do. And then, of course, I used to like climbing telephone poles.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I don't know why. I enjoyed climbing telephone poles. In Vietnam, there was only about that big around. And they had all these cracks from the intense heat over there. So when you climb them, you had to be careful. You put your spurs, you kind of, then you shove down. You didn't drive them down like you do stateside. You got to make sure you're not going to shove it in a crack.
Wow.
Well, I learned a cute little maneuver called a combat jump. I stepped in a crack when I was up top on the 40-foot pole, and I always rolled my sleeve down. I always put the gauntlets on when I climbed in poles, and I was up there, and I stepped in a crack, and down I come. It's called burn the pole. Of course, you grab it like this, and I stop, and my spikes came in. I said, hey, you know, so I had to take a little hop to get up my nerve every time, and after that, I could go down 15 some odd feet at a hop.
Wow.
Well, I wouldn't want to try it now, 70 years old. But
No, I don't think
when you're
so.
19 and invincible, you can do things.
Yeah.
So I used to learn that. I used to do that combat jump. I had more fun. I was the only one crazy enough to do it. And we had a firefight outside our camp one day, and I think it was a spent .45 round hit my spike. There's no time to stick around and find out if that's what it is, it's time to get out of town.
Right.
So,
yeah.
I was glad I'd learned that little maneuver. I went down there, and I actually found that piece of lead, and it was a spent .45 round. They estimated there was no firefights really going on. They figured it probably traveled over the wind maybe 2-3 miles.
Wow.
You figure how much a .45 slug weighs.
Yeah.
They just said they had no, you could probably caught it in your hand,
Yeah.
you know, a little warm. And I just, well, sometimes, and add strength through adversity, something happens, you learn a certain skills, you know.
Okay, so when you came home, you, of course, you could have joined the VFW.
I'm a member of the VFW.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then you joined the American Legion.
Well, I joined the Legion first. We didn't have a VFW locally.
Okay.
I'm not putting down on military government, but let's say they're very busy. Like right now, if you try to get a detail to come to bury, it is a good chance that there won't be any personnel to send to your burial detail. They just don't have the people anymore. So it was, the Marines came, they folded the flag, they presented to my parents, but it was the members of the American Legion, and let's be honest, it was the guys that drank too much alcohol, it was the one that played poker, the bad, also it was the bankers and the real good people. It was everybody, the average American guy, they came to help my parents. So my father joined, and I got out in February, and 2 days after I got home, I was a member of the American Legion. The next year I had my 50 years.
Wow, 50 years. That's
Which
an accomplishment.
we just gave an award out for a guy 50 years, and
That's
I said,
right.
the only problem I had presenting this, in fact, I had the past command to present it because 50 years was supposed to be for old people. I passed out probably 50, 60 of them things over the years. And that's supposed to be for old people, not for me. That's another one of them when the bullet comes at your flashlight, you know. Where'd that come from?
Okay, so a lot of people just don't realize that the American Legion here in Wolfeboro is alive.
It's alive and well.
Yeah.
Yes. We need a lot of members. When I first joined, there was probably 20 or 30 very active members. We had an active firing squad. Of course, you know, they put me right on it. But my wife and I have made it a personal obligation. We put all the flags out, all the graves for Wolfeboro and Tuftonboro. And we're putting out in the vicinity of 7 groves. It's not quite that high, but it's right up there. And some of the places we go, like a friend of mine said, you got to pump in daylight, it's so far out there.
Yeah.
And you go down to Pleasant Valley, a lot of people listening to TV will know where it is. You go down to Pleasant Valley and you go up this, and then you go up there when you get, and you keep going, when you get up to level, then you go down a bit, gives you a break, and then there's a Revolutionary War vet out there. We got some places, there's one Civil War veteran.
Wow.
And I was amazed when I took over this project, there was flags out there. And there wasn't all ratty like the guys, they had been doing the job. The people before me was doing the job. And that was my friend Kyle Shannon was doing it before me. And so it's very important to do that. And the American Legion started, and we're still maintaining the parades for Memorial Day and Independence Day.
Yep.
It's not always July 4th.
No, no.
So Independence Day, we get it. And I've been working on that project. My friend Don Morgan did it before me. In '94, he asked me to come on board to help, and he was having trouble with his back. And the lady who used to do his typing, he'd write it all out by hand. He had excellent handwriting. And then this lady would type it up in carbon copy. So he had like 3 copies.
Wow.
And he didn't have any help down on the parade line. So I got my first computer, had no clue what I was doing with it, but you couldn't savor this thing. you hit Control S, and everything was got all scrambled. So you had to make sure you had to have everything perfect. When you get that page, print it. Now you can save it after that later on. You can delete and all that. You can get everything somewhat back together.
Right.
You got to get it printed, and you couldn't take the floppies were this big.
Yeah.
Them 5 1/4 jobbers,
Yep.
big ones. And there's strength through adversity. There again, I fought my way through that, and I was able to make my friend Don several copies of his parade. And I took him down the printer downtown, and then it was a whole lot easier me trying to
Right.
do this. Remember the pin writer to sound like a teletype machine when it's printing out.
Yeah.
And so that made it better. Then the following year, I got a better computer that helped me. Our local newspaper aired, and they forgot to print the application because you can only get it through our local newspaper to get an application. That got them sales and got our applications out. Well, we had a daily newspaper for a while, and when she forgot to put it in, honest mistake, I jumped on that with both feet like my spikes on the telephone pole.
Right.
Because I went right up there from that time on without any problems insulting the newspaper. We've got our own applications out there, and I have Peggy Calverwell from shipping downtown prints out 250. She charged me nothing. She
Wow.
never charged me for it.
Really?
It when she was doing the business mailbox, etc. They never charged me for the thing for the American Legion.
Well, that's great.
Because she's with the auxiliary down to the Alton.
Yep.
And
You're now the commander.
again,
Again, how many times have you been commander?
this will be going into my 16th non-consecutive year.
Wow.
But I know guys have been doing it 40 years, so
Yeah.
there's nobody else. What's really sad is when we're putting the flags out, I am putting the flags on the graves of the people who did my job before me, and I
Wow.
knew them. And you can't help, you get kind of teary-eyed. There's Joe Valley, there's Ernie Wilkes, there's Mike Wilkes, there's my friend Ray McCarthy. He played pedal steel guitar for me.
Really?
And so I put all these flags out on people that I knew
Yeah.
quite well. So it's really tough. And our membership is in the cemeteries.
Wow.
That's where mostly Lakeview Cemetery, but we got some over at Pine Hill and more and more at the Townhouse Cemetery in Tuftonboro. And that's another big cemetery. It's getting bigger every year. And I've seen another thing that's coming up the last 4 or 5 years. Rachel and I pretty well know where veterans are. We can't remember off the top of our head, but we know there's a veteran here and a veteran there. When you get there, you remember it. We're finding stones just planted 2005
Really?
because people are moving to Wolfeboro and they're bringing their loved one. It's only an urn. They're bringing them up with them, and they want them with them.
Yep.
So they put them in Lakeview Cemetery, and we're finding these stones out there, and they call us up. They're hollering, "My husband's never got a flag." So I call up local funeral director. Said, "Oh yeah, she just put him there about 2 months ago." Okay, so we call him up. Where's he at? And we'll go to put them. The stands that we put the flags in are referred to as markers,
Right. Yep.
not the stone. It's a marker. That is the term that the company who makes them stands, they call them markers. So
Yeah, I had a friend of mine whose father was in World War II, and she never got a flag. She had him cremated, but never got a flag. And so I had to go to the local funeral home and say, "Look, here's the situation," and they gave me the flag,
the interment flag.
Yeah.
Yep.
which was nice.
I had a situation where there's certain problems in families sometimes.
Really?
Families being what they are. So I was very well known by the postmaster down here, downtown. And so I went down and I talked to her, and she gave me another flag, and we presented 2 flags at that funeral.
2.
2. 2 parents.
Yep.
So the senior member of the 2 families got their flag, and the That's not an easy thing to do. I
No.
pass well over 200-300 flags. You don't even count anymore, and
Yeah.
it's never gets easy. You've read the prayer.
Yes.
I can't read that prayer. I get all teary-eyed.
Yeah.
It just.
So we have a lot of veterans here in Wolfeboro,
Yeah.
and we'd like to get them into the American Legion.
We'd like to. We can help them if we know who they are, and they know who we are. We're not just that building on the hill.
Right. Right. And that
Yeah.
plate in front of their car there's a
Veterans
story
plate.
behind it.
Yep.
And we need to, let them know that there's a place where we can sit down like this and talk.
No, there was a thing at the selectmen's meeting last night that intrigued me. Now, I don't know the name of the article. A gentleman brought up an article he would like to see in this town. Like, for instance, my cousin, who lives over here in Pine Street. He served 3 years in the United States Regular Army. And he did his time. And he got discharged shortly before the Vietnam era, so-called, came into being.
Right.
He's not a veteran. He served only slightly less time than I did. And he can't get any veteran benefits. He can't go to the VA. And we've got people like the gentleman who brought it up last night that they served in the submarines.
Yep.
Several fathoms underneath the ocean during peacetime. And a lot of them in between the Vietnam and the first Persian Gulf incident. Since the first Persian Gulf incident, everyone goes in the service now is considered a veteran. But there was a small hole in there, and they served this time as well as the rest of us
They
did.
sure did.
And so it is my opinion that next year, if that gets put on the ballot, we ought to vote it in.
That's for the tax deferment, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They gotta own real estate. They gotta own
Right.
home. If you're renting, it doesn't affect you.
Yeah.
That was the gentleman's point. That not every veteran in that area is eligible, so it's not like it's going to cost us millions of dollars of loss of revenue.
Right.
Because there's really not that many. I mean, you figure how many people rent in this area.
Yeah.
Then they're not going. There's no exemption without owning the property.
And they've got to be they have to be honorably discharged.
They got to be honorable. There are these people that tell me, like, from membership to the various service organizations. There's the American Legion, the VFW, the AMVETS, and there's so many other ones out there. You can't say general under honorable conditions.
Right.
You can't say general and later on it'll turn honorable unless they got a separate DD 214 that's specified honorable.
Mhm.
Then it's no good. It has to be honorable. Now, there's another thing about honorable discharge while we're thinking of it. There are many people out there that were career, Marines, Army, all our armed forces, and they served many years of good, and then they got in a problem. Got in a fist fight down at the bar. I mean, how many career Marines didn't? Okay, so Army and Marines, the Navy, and I lick you, and there it goes. And then they get somehow they wind up with an honorable dishonorable discharge. Well, what they don't think of is take the last honorable discharge, because when you ship over, you get a DD 214 for that area.
Right.
You get it's like you sign up again.
Yep.
Take that honorable discharge, you take that down to VA and get your best benefits. Because the government owes you for the 5, 10, 15 years of honorable service that you did do, no matter what mistakes you made in the end.
Right.
Now, if you get a person that only served 3, 4 years and they did something stupid, well, it doesn't work for them. We're talking people that was in as a career.
Right. Yeah.
And a lot of people don't think of it. I was asked about a gentleman one time who got a dishonorable discharge, and he really, it was a political thing. And the man that he had trouble with was somebody's boy, and he was just a country boy, and things get washed away with it. And he was 80 years old, and he wanted his wife to be taken care of because he knew he was going to die. He had congestive heart failure. So I put him in touch with a service officer, and I told him take his last DD 214 because he was a gunnery sergeant, E7. Take your last DD-214 and go to the VA. And I said, and bring your case files with you, because I talked to the service officer, and he brought him down there, and they found that guy didn't get treated very well.
Yeah.
It happens in our system. You can't help
sure.
it. And that's where guys like you and I come in. We put him in touch with a professional service officer. Even if you or I don't know how to do this, we know the person that does.
Yeah.
And that's where we can help in the Legion.
Right.
We can just steer them in the direction where they need help. There are people who want to sign up for the VA. They don't know how. VA can be very slow. I've seen them moved up when you go see one of our service officers. Mm-hmm. Because they've been in. Most service officers serve themselves. And they want to make sure you get your benefits, especially our older ones.
Yeah.
I've heard of a gentleman who they called him, and like myself, we never really received any injuries while in the service. They called him to say, you know, the VA is doing this and that, want to get you in the system. So they give him service like 5 years, and all of a sudden they said, you're not eligible because you didn't get hurt in the military. He said, I told you about that all them years ago. What's this all about? He mentioned it to me, and I got him in touch with a vet rep. Say that fast. Yeah.
Vet rep.
Yeah. And he was at our Legion Hall in Wolfeboro, and we was getting numbers together to start the VA that we had in Wolfeboro for a while. Had a clinic for a while.
Oh, okay.
And they had to get the numbers of the people, and my friend was right there. And he fixed the guy up and got his benefits to resume.
Oh, good.
And I don't know all the legalities involved in there, but he checked into it, and he says, see, that's... So joining the Legion is a good way to help yourself.
Yes. Now, you came out as a sergeant, right?
Yes, E5.
E5.
Yeah. Buck sergeant, yeah.
Buck sergeant.
Buck sergeant,
I
yeah.
haven't heard that term in a long time. Buck sergeant. Yeah, I came out of the National Guard as a staff sergeant. So, but I guess, you know, right in
Well, this is your staff sergeant. You're at the rocker.
there. Yeah.
We don't.
Yeah. Well, this has been interesting, and is there a number that somebody who's watching this who might want to join us in the Legion? Is there a number they can call?
I got to look it up. I got too many numbers on this thing. You see, I got a flip phone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Send and receive, my personal communication device. And I put everything in by the first name because I cannot remember the last name. Okay, you can call us at our Legion Hall in Wolfeboro, 569-9817.
569-9817.
Yep.
Okay. Good.
And myself or Jim Collins, he checks it often, and he can give you the information you want. We have some booklets about the American Legion, why you should join the American Legion.
Right.
There's so many things the Legion can do that even us long-timers can't remember all that.
Yeah.
So there's certain RX benefits, and there's something that's been done away with, but mainly it's you could call it a group of brothers and sisters because
Right.
we're all in here together. And we can tell our stories and you know, embellish a bit here and there.
Yeah,
you know.
I know, right, yeah. Things that, well, I don't want to say normal, but people
Yeah.
who weren't in wouldn't understand. Like some of the terms we use.
We had this big guy. I mean, he had muscles. You'd think he was a wrestler or a prize fighter in the cauliflower years. He'd done his share of bouncing and being thrown out of bars. And his hobby was welding these real fine things out of brass, these sculptures.
Wow.
And all the little tiny wires, and sometimes you create the wire with the torch. You watch it like lights when they make glass and all that stuff. It was amazing. This great big glue. He could do that fine work, and he had his fingers all knots on his fingers, and
Wow.
you know, and it was just amazing what veterans are capable of doing. You look at him, you don't even think of it.
I know.
Yeah.
Harold, I want to thank you for coming on the program. This has been great. I really appreciate it.
Been fun.
Sergeant Harold Chamberlin, And we thank you so much for your story and for what's going on. And again, anybody that wants to join the Legion, if you see Harold downtown, and you're bound to see him downtown, be sure and ask him. Again, my name is Clint Brown, and you've been watching Veterans on the Front Porch.